Well, now we're going to talk to Jimbob, who makes comics that are fittingly named Made by Jimbob, madebygimbob.com, and he has a Savage Memes Volume 4 collection that you can buy now. So let's talk to Jimbob. Well, it's super cool to be talking to you. I know we all saw your comics start to go viral. Like I don't know when they started to go big, but I saw them during the pandemic, and that's kind of when, I don't know if that's when it started taking off for you.
Yeah, it was a little before that. It was like I had a big account, and then so things went viral. There were different things before the pandemic, but the pandemic was such a perfect target because it really, obviously, you guys know, it just brought out the lunacy to another level,
Right.
where I didn't have to work very hard. I just had to be an honest reporter, and suddenly, you're doing better satire. The world does the writing for you. So
Right.
Yeah, that seems to be what happens with us too.
Yeah.
It's just you can't really write this stuff sometimes.
no, just write it down, and then
Just write it down.
you're like, how did you come up with that? I'm constantly saying I didn't.
They did.
They did out there. I'm just looking.
Yeah, that's funny. That person who identifies as they did.
Right. Yeah. They, them,
Yeah,
sir.
that's funny. So, and you're writing and how did you get into this in the first place?
Well, I did live a whole life, 15 years in Los Angeles. So I was always in and around entertainment, culture, TV and stuff. But so being in Los Angeles, I was at that time a default liberal, and I started doodling. I knew I was going to do something creative. I just didn't know what to say. And at that time, I had voted for Obama because I was a default liberal, and that's just what you do. And then he dropped a lot of bombs. And so I did my first post, political post anyway, where, it's the image of him, the infamous image of him dropping the mic, right? Because he's so cool. Well, I just swapped the mic with a bomb. And oh man, the response from my sort of colleagues or community, let's say, or associates in Los Angeles, you're making him look bad. It was like right before Trump. So you're making him look bad. Trump's going to win. Like, what are you doing? You're on the other side. And I realized, wow, there's something to this form of memes, satire, doodling, whatever you want to call it. I realized at that point that I had something, and I just had to I had to fine tune it, right? And figure out which targets I was going to hit. So yeah, I went target left, and that kind of gave me my first resistance. A plane takes off, it needs the resistance. It was like all of those people pushed me up by yelling at me and calling me names, and I was like, thank you. And then I was up in the air.
I kind of feel like Obama made himself look bad by dropping bombs.
That's right. Yeah, but he smiled and he told a joke, and then everyone forgets about it, and that's it.
That's right.
Right.
It's like you could do it. I mean, you could do it in a really cool, way, and then you just smile. Just
Yeah, absolutely.
I call that a psychopath when you drop bombs and you smile about it. But
Yeah, he was good at it. He was very good. So we get accused of this a lot too. Do you feel like you ever punch down? Is that something you do?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
I punch down. I usually don't go after like a person. I usually go after whole worldviews. So I'll go after like bad vegan arguments or atheists in general. Some of the Reddit tier level arguments from atheists. I consider that kind of punching down, but I think I kind of isolate punching down to a specific kind of person, like going after a single person for just who they are, as opposed to a set of surrounding ideas that are around them. And sometimes my form of punching down would be someone leaves a really stupid comment, and then I focus on it to show how silly it is, and then it becomes a meme. So it's unfortunate for that person who's not very well known becomes the focus. So in a way, it's kind of like, I mean, some people would call it like online bullying, but this is also how I generate content. Yeah. So right. I mean, they say it. So I'm like, okay, if you can say this, you can take the backhanded slap that I'm going to give you. And so yeah, to that extent. But I try not to. I try to focus upward and outward a little bit. But I'm not against it, by the way. I'm actually not against punching down.
Yeah, well, the whole thing with punching down is it's not really a paradigm that we even buy into, and I don't know what your opinion is on it, but for us, it's like when you're talking about punching up and punching down, you've already sorted people into these classes in your head, and you're like, these are the lower people and these are the higher people, and you can't make fun of them. And we reject that very idea,
Yeah.
So we make fun of whatever's funny. And if the people in this group are committing, ridiculous contradictions in their philosophy and worldview, then we'll make fun of them. And a lot of times, it'll be the more rich and powerful people, but sometimes it won't be. So and so we just kind of reject that from the outset.
Absolutely. I actually, similarly, I reject the sort of like, I get accused of infighting because I'll make fun of Jordan Peterson or Ben Shapiro sometimes. Only because when you limit it to just the left-right ping pong, sometimes you get lost. There are some things that can be talked about within those paradigms. And sometimes if you go after like a soft take, kind of like I make fun of Peterson's soft Christian pragmatic take, and so I go after him in that way. I try not to be mean-spirited, but I do go after the soft ambiguity, which is obvious, right? Not just in his Christian takes necessarily, which ultimately could be helpful. I'm not saying they wouldn't be in some cases. I'm just saying the soft approach, I just see it for what it is, but it's not just there. He said he's kind of that way in a lot of his categories in what he's talking about. So people are, Jimbob, why do you have to infight? And I'm like, I'm a cartoonist, so I may align with a right, and I may align with a Christian right specifically, but it doesn't mean I can't isolate some targets within the red jerseys, let's say. And I think that's actually sometimes more helpful, because the same thing with Obama, when I was leaning lefty, I thought that my job was actually to point to my own team, the faults of my own team, not because it's too easy to point to the other side. So I try not to go for low-hanging fruit in that, go after the blue-haired commies who are, $800,000 in debt because they were promised a job after their Marxist training, we
never go after them. We never go after them either.
Yeah. No, you have to keep going after them, but there is more to play with on the playground, and I have fun doing that. And it allows me like some freedom because I pursue the truth of the matter, as opposed to the right political current, right? But there is a current. So, but it's like remember Breitbart used to say, politics is downstream from culture. Well, I'm at the point now where what's culture downstream from? And I think you guys might agree. I think it's theology. I think that culture is informed, even if it's a broken naturalistic paradigm, it's still informed by something. And so I like to look at that particular way of doing my artwork and commentaries through that lens.
Yeah, through worldview. It's kind of like on the broader sense, it's like worldview. And I think we have to make fun of ourselves too. I agree with you. We do it a lot with the Babylon Bee. It's important for us. I guess that's how the Babylon Bee started, is making Christian jokes.
We do one Chick-fil-A joke for every 9 AOC jokes.
Nice, that's a good ratio.
And we feel like that's a good,
It's a pretty good ratio.
Yeah.
They just don't get any traction in the secular world, so they think we're always, quote unquote, punching down, because we make fun of Rachel Levine or whatever.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you create a comic, I'm not going to ask the question, where do you get your ideas? Because that's a dumb question, but...
there are no dumb questions.
No, for us, there's because sometimes there's a seed of like, there's this ridiculous thing out in the world that's going on right now. When it was the mask mandates or the vaccine mandates or Fauci, or like there's something out there that it's like, I know there's just a ridiculous contradiction, and I have to figure out what is the funniest contrast we can provide, that'll pull out that truth. And you want to do it in a funny way, but sometimes the goal is like, man, we have to expose this for what it is.
Right.
And sometimes in comedy, that can lead you to not finding the funniest thing because you're trying to make the point too hard, And
absolutely.
I feel like that's where Christians and conservatives go wrong a lot of the time, is like, yeah, we're going to slam them. And then it's like, yeah, but that wasn't funny or clever.
Right. No, yeah, that's a fine tension there. I go for the truth, and then I figure out how to make the truth funny, as opposed to make something funny and then do away with part of the truth, which I think as you guys seen with modern comedy now, they've abandoned truth and just went after like what's superficially what people might laugh at, but not necessarily funny. So the truth of the matter is really important. And I would say that sometimes in my process, it's 80% true or whatever, and it's only 20% funny, or it's funny in a truthful way where it's more like the premise itself is so true that it's comical. And sometimes with Babylon Bee, you definitely see that where just the truth of the matter of a headline that's actually not technically satire because it's real, but it's like you don't need to rewrite it, and so that's funny in itself. So my process is like you said, you look out in the world and see, or sometimes I'll talk with people directly, and there'll be this conversation. Recently, someone in the comments was like, I was making fun of. I forgot what I was making fun of. Something about fear, right? Being paranoid about fear. I'm in these overlapping sort of like truth or conspiracy groups, and sometimes they go way too far into a fear position. And when I was talking about fear with somebody, and you always get this kind of like slogan that fear controls everyone, right? And I didn't draw this one out yet, but it's someone saying like, he's like dropping the truth folder and he's saying, they want to control us with fear, which is true in itself. But there's this other element where they can control people with their vices, with euphoria, with the opposite of fear, with their sin. You can basically intoxicate people and draw them out of their, let's say, their discipline, out of their commitments, and have them chase their own wants and desires. And I thought just that statement alone, I didn't figure out how to make the joke yet. It's probably just some contrasting reveal, but I look at it from that framework where I go, okay, it's commonly thought that fear controls, which is true, but it's not the only thing that controls. And so there's this dichotomy. Maybe it's not even a false binary. It's just both. And that's kind of how my brain operates. And then I have to figure out ideally how to keep it in one frame with the least amount of words in the bubbles.
That's so interesting. You're going to be comparing, it's like the dystopian literature, 1984 versus A Brave New World. Like you got, they control through fear in 1984, they control through euphoria in Brave New World.
Totally.
And these are the two visions of the future that we're entering in, and we're kind of entering into both visions, right? So it's like both 1984 and A Brave New World.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you do that? How do you put that in one picture?
Yeah, well, I mean, in this case, I have to think about it, but I usually try to incorporate what they're wearing, because you can add an extra step, take away an extra step by having them wear a shirt, which most people who are of a part of some sort of revolutionary mindset, which I am not, they usually wear a shirt that has some slogan of the new utopian vision. And by the way, this exists on the right side as well, a utopian. It's not as clear as the left side, the progressive utopian, but it still exists, and it's fun for me to go in there because for my Christian worldview, I believe the world is fallen and that our redemption is a spiritual act and not a utility-based system. That doesn't mean we can't fight and build and do things. It's just that ultimately it's not some outcome we seek here in the now. And a lot of people who follow me actually, who are more like new agey and sort of like libertarian freedom fighters, they don't like that when I say stuff like that. They want to turn it around and then make it right. So it's like, no, I understand the impulse, right? I understand the intent. I don't even disagree with the sentiment. It's just that I draw a very fine line between a spiritual life and a utilitarian sort of based outcome system where we'll finally get there if we just get X, right? If we just around the corner, because that's kind of ironically what all these like New World Order the World Economic Forum, the people who want to standardize all things for the greater good. You hear these. I mean, historically, the greater good is something when you hear that, you should run or buy a lot of guns or something. So,
well, it's interesting you're talking about this kind of utopian vision of Earth kind of becoming a utopia. The Christian, when a Christian starts talking about the kingdom of God strictly being here on Earth, it's kind of like they're dipping their toes into sort of a progressive ideology, and not necessarily the one that we're talking about, which is the kingdom that's beyond this world. It definitely touches our world, but it goes beyond this world as well. And we have to remember that it's not just for here; it's for there too, and it's for eternity, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So you're a Christian, which is great. We didn't know that until
I think we did.
we kind of knew that because of this one cartoon.
Oh, is that how we found out?
Yeah, I think so.
We didn't just ask him.
No, we should ask you. You're a Christian. Have you always been a
Yes.
Christian?
I was
Yeah.
raised Christian. I rejected for that 15-year stint in Los Angeles, and then I think it was having my first child where it was like acted like a colander. Like you realize what you believe when you're confronted with teaching your own children what you think you believe, and then suddenly, if you're honest, you strain a lot of that stuff out. So a lot of relativism went out the window. A lot of progressive nonsense, hedonism, a bunch of stuff just was like.
It was hard to look at your child and say, "Hey, I just want to let you know that life has no meaning." Yeah.
Right, you're a
This is
piece
all
of dust. You came from exactly. You were just this weird like bacteria worm. And there was a cosmic fart, and now your life is me. I'm so happy that I've come to this position where I could actually rail against those things which I once remember just telling people this stuff and telling my parents this and being like, no, everything's meaningless. And my mom would be like, that's a contradiction. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? You don't know. I'm going to get a tattoo or, whatever it is. And it's
I'm going to wear steel-toed boots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so it's just so freeing to abandon that view and go to like an absolute standard. Right. So yeah, here I am back. I'm back.
That's great.
Now, judging by the beard, are you Eastern Orthodox or what?
I'm very interested in Eastern Orthodox. I'm not a catechumen or anything, but I've because of the kind of sort of like paradigms I'm interested in, and it all goes to sort of like argumentation, not in a replacement of faith or anything. It's just that I'm drawn to apologetics in a way because when you really start looking at stuff, you want to be able to defend your faith to some extent, but you don't want to put your full faith in reason and logic alone or like evidentialism necessarily. There's something beyond that's transcendental that we're living in. And so a lot of these conversations have gravitated me toward different communities. And so I like to ask these questions, and it's very uncomfortable. Speaking of like the tension or the discomfort that can be created within your own sort of group or tribe, Christianity as a whole does have a lot of tensions. And I'm actually interested in those tensions because I feel like that's another colander where you're constantly trying to filter down, maybe even if it's like apophatically, like determining what's not the case and trying to get closer to truth. And you'd be surprised. Some of sort of like modern, you've seen it. I mean, you've seen some of these modern churches call themselves Christians who have like a rainbow flag in the background. And so that's where I think some of the spiritual warfare actually is. The ineffectual atheist who just doesn't care is not they're a danger to themselves, but the ones who co-opt or infiltrate and like the progressive leftist take on Christianity now is going to get not popular but more presented to us, and I think that it's our duty to fight against that because it's falsely representing. It's a counterfeit. So we have to worry about counterfeits more than the one who just rejects, because at least they're clear. They're rejecting. They believe, they were a whale or something. Nothing means,
some
no
of them
meaning.
Still are. Am I right?
Hey.
Yeah, exactly.
Their
Yeah,
moms.
exactly.
Their moms
Exactly.
were.
And so, yeah, I think that whole world is really interesting. So that's probably why what drew me closer to like more distinct, clear denominations. But in no way am I like a fully committed catechumen or anything.
That's cool. I like what he said about making sure that we're drawing distinctions between like these things that are, the people that totally reject versus the people that are taking it and presenting a counterfeit. I mean, that's what the entire New Testament is. It's books written to people that were dealing with counterfeits. He's
Right.
not
And
like that's it. That's the entire thing, and the process of becoming.
Well, I know the guys. I know the
that.
guys like Benny Hinn and like the guys that are out there just like stealing millions of dollars and duping people into giving money. I know those guys are dangerous, but I've always felt like the guys that were a little bit closer were more dangerous, at least for the American church. You know, guys like Joel Osteen and guys who are like, there's like, no, they're not driving a Lamborghini around. They're not like quite at that level, but I feel like that makes it more deceitful and it makes it more dangerous.
Prosperity or progressive church. Progressive church is far more
right.
dangerous. Yeah.
Exactly. The prosperity part is key. Remember I said with like the fear, because there's this type of theology that can just hit people over the head with fire and brimstone threats, which I don't think is very effective. But then there's the other ones that do the opposite, where they cater to people's wants and desires, and they try to reformat Christianity to you get what you want theology. And obviously we all know, and if we don't know, we'll probably live through a time where we're absolutely humbled that living a Christ-like life doesn't always equate to good things happening around us that we prefer happening. In a lot of cases, it's the opposite, especially biblically. It's not like, I know I'm living with Christ because all of the fruit came in and everything's good and everyone's healthy. So, I'm blessed. Sure, you're blessed, but that's not the measure, right? That can't be the measure, because when things aren't going well, that's actually when you're tested mostly. And so that's why those things are, I believe, false paradigms that cater to people's desires. And why they're so effective, by the way, is that people fall victim, or sometimes they're not victims, they're willfully doing it, to worldliness. They become of the world as opposed to in the world, not of the world. And it's very easy for any one of us, by the way. This is not a high horse thing. We're all vulnerable to being worldly.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever done a comic about Joel Osteen? And what would we have to pay you to commission a Joel Osteen comic?
That could. Let me think about that. There's definitely a bunch of funny things there. I mean, you could have several panels, whether it's the flight, the private jets, or there's
something good. There's
clearly
something good
contradictions.
There,
yeah,
yachts.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yachts and things like that. I'd have to investigate further.
All right.
There's definitely a plethora to choose from in that arena, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd put that sticker on my computer.
Now, have you ever run into any kind of censoring, shadow banning, et cetera, on social media?
Yeah, I'm on my 5th Instagram account. I hit my first account hit 115,000. I worked very hard for that. I bought 0 of them, and then weirdly enough, I went after vegans, and then it was taken down. I thought that's a weird thing. I thought they were just like, it's like offset culture. It's not really front and center, but that's what ended up doing it for some reason. And I had to start over several times. Got it back up to like 30,000. And now I'm on my 5th account, which I think is like 12,000. So yeah, the shadow banning. But this is another topic that I've kind of discovered, is that I'm not actually against censorship. I'm against the worldview that's the reasoning for the censorship. So I look at the worldview, because on the right side of things, there are things I would gladly censor. Any sort of like sexuality, sexualizing children. There's decency codes that I actually want to live by and want other men to enforce in whatever ways they do. So I don't take this like, which is kind. It's not dominant necessarily, but it's kind of obvious in the right side of things, where they've kind of gone to like a classical liberal approach to decency, where it's like a Michael Malice approach, where it's like, well, it's not hurting anyone, so what's the difference? I reject that.
That was a really good Michael Malice.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not hurting anyone. And I'm like, no, there's more to that, like, because like some disgusting image next to a park is not technically hurting anyone either. So there's some other aspect to this warfare of morality that's clearly not just legal, that goes beyond legal. And so I look at that stuff too, and try to poke fun at it or attack it from a different perspective. And there's plenty to choose from. But I forget why I went on that tangent though. It was I don't know. It was something about there's a middle leaning right.
Yeah, for
groups.
Censorship.
There's good censorship.
Oh, censorship. Yeah. I'm just saying there's good censorship. And so I'm not against shadow banning. And so I think that's also presented falsely, where it's like, the people on the right sometimes will just argue outright for no censorship, and I don't think that's true, and I don't even think they believe that. I think that you have to figure out what it is your values are, because it's a trick to argue against, like, let's say the left, and just be like, I've heard Ben Shapiro kind of say it once or twice, where it's like, well, that's what they do. They censor and they do all this stuff. And I'm like, we should do that
Pretty good, Ben
too.
Shapiro.
Have you ever considered getting into impressions?
Yeah, definitely. Depends on what you mean by impression, It's like, I do,
That was
I do
Jordan
impressions. Yeah.
It's crazy out there.
I take him way far. I start crying. I do live streams where I'll just like go full.
That's good.
Why do you hate Jordan Peterson? That's the response I get sometimes. Yeah. So I'm okay with censorship to some extent. It's just that the question is why and what's the standard? And so I think that's the real battle. And it's not this false battle of like absolute free speech.
Sure.
No, I think that especially Christian companies, Christian culture should be socially pressuring decency. And that's actually, obviously, in the last 3 years, we all know how powerful social pressure is, right? So I'm not against it. It doesn't have to be wicked or like deceitful. It's just that it's like being a parent, but in society. And so I don't take this like sort of individualist approach where you just, do what you want and don't say anything in public and like pressure people to behave a certain way. I'm like, no, I think you do. It doesn't mean you have to be annoying about it. It just means that it's a real thing that men actually keep each other in check a lot of time through pressure with friends. Like a good friend will actually intervene on your behavior if they're a good friend and they know it's wrong. But the analogy now in modern politics is like, leave me alone, man. And then it's kind of like, you do you, bro. And I've gone through that phase and I'm just done with it. I would never teach my children you do you philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm just realizing that we could green screen stuff onto his shirt.
I know. I usually have a green screen behind me, and my wife was like, make sure you take the green screen off.
Yeah, that would have been cool. You would have been a floating head. That would have been kind of awesome.
Totally. I should try that one day where it's just my head.
What is the picture on your shirt? I can't see it.
Oh, I just made this.
That's awesome.
It's
Chad.
It's the Chad
Blessed.
Chad,
That's
yes.
great.
Yeah,
that's great.
Blessed.
All right. Well, you have a new book out, Savage Memes Volume 4. We've got a copy here for all of our viewers to check out. Post-Truth Booster, made by Jimbob. So everybody go check that out. Where can people go check that out at?
Madebyjimbob.com. That's the first thing that'll show up. And I've given you guys and your listeners a promo code. It's just BEE.
Oh,
and
awesome.
That's the code for a discount. I think it's free shipping in the US for US customers.
Wonderful.
Use the code word BEE.
Awesome. There's a bunch of cool stickers and stuff too. We got them. The team is plastering them all over our windows.
Good.
And stuff as
That's
we
right.
speak.
That's good to know.
I put 2 on my computer.
Did you already?
That's awesome.
Yeah. Super good.
All right. Is there any other ways that people can support your work or follow you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've got a YouTube, or I do streams, 2-hour streams, rants, cultural, and theological talks, debates, and I basically put the link in the stream and people jump on and random people jump in. It's quite entertaining sometimes. So that's on YouTube. Made by Jimbob is my Instagram, and madebyjimbob.com. And it's pretty much my 3 things. I'm on Gab and some other things, but those are my primary locations. And so, yeah, I do obviously my books, and I do, the impressions. I do cameos for people's birthdays because I can animate them. And so there's all sorts of creative stuff that I'm doing. I'm always drawn to more creative ways of telling the truth and trying to get the good out in the world.
That's good.
Awesome. And we'll have links to all that in the show notes. Now, as we wrap up, we are going to ask you 10 rapid-fire questions. These are the 10 questions we ask every guest who comes on our podcast.
The 10 questions.
The first one is, have you ever met Carmen?
No.
Okay.
Second one, are you a Calvinist or an Arminian?
Neither.
So an Arminian.
You get to add one book to the Bible. What is it?
I wouldn't add anything to the Bible.
All right, completely unrelated question. What's your favorite book besides the Bible?
Let me see. I think my favorite recent book was My favorite recent book was actually a book by Patrick Wood called Technocracy, The Hard Road to New Order. I actually recommend having him on your podcast too.
Oh, sure.
Cool.
Write that down, Dan.
Yeah, Patrick Wood, Technocracy, Hard Road to World Order.
Okay.
And that would be right after Revelation.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, so cigars or pipes?
Neither.
You get to hang out with any three people, living or dead. Who are they? You can't pick Jesus.
Maybe Van Morrison for a couple minutes. Because he would probably get sick of me.
Van Morrison, but just for a couple minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
just for a couple
I
minutes.
would get
You don't
sick of
wanna,
him. That's
Yeah. I would get sick of him. You know, don't meet your heroes unless it's under a minute or whatever. Let me see. You said 3, right?
Yes.
Yeah, Van Morrison. Weirdly enough, I would have liked to ask Michael Jackson a couple of key questions before he passed. Just, you know. You know, maybe Jordan Peterson. You know, I make fun of him a lot, but it'd be fun to talk to him as him and see if he can, you know, we can play a game.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be fun. I like that. Whiskey or beer?
Generally beer, unless it's like really good, like a very expensive Japanese stuff that I shouldn't actually be buying. But beer.
It's good.
What would be the first thing you would do as president?
First thing, I think I might push to make pornography illegal.
That's a good answer. I haven't
Nice.
heard that one. Yeah, I like that one. I would do that too. Have you ever punched anyone or been punched?
Sure, yeah, definitely. I have 3 older brothers.
Okay. Any like particularly good stories?
Well, I mean, I grew up in the Catskill Mountains of New York, so we were just basically like wild animals. So a lot of like walnut fights, just throwing rocks and walnuts at each other's heads. Frozen paintballs. I got shot with a lot of frozen paintballs as a kid.
That's painful.
But I didn't know it was abuse. It's like you're just a wild, fun kid. You know? So I feel like there's this weird, you're like,
Stop
oh,
shooting
I'm
me,
tougher
Dad.
now. Yeah, exactly.
that's
Well,
right.
as my oldest brothers. Yeah. So so a lot of fun stories like that. A lot of outdoor activity, a lot of pain and suffering.
great.
You get to go to one concert, any band in history. Who do you go see?
Ooh. In all of history,
All of history.
Doc Watson.
All right.
Nice. Good call. All right, the final question is, do you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior?
Absolutely.
All right.
That's it.
We got him.
We got him. He's in.
Well, thanks for joining us. And listeners, please go check out the all the stuff that he makes at madebyjimbob.com. Follow him on YouTube and Instagram and all of that wonderful stuff. And check out the new book, Savage Memes Volume 4. We were flipping through it here in the office. Great stuff.
It's flipping great.
Thank you. That's a good. Can I take that?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for coming on.
Well, you're like,
yeah.
yeah,
Maybe.
thanks for
See you later. Nice talking to you, man.
you,
Thank
man.
you.
See
Thank
you
you.
guys.